Why is there something rather than nothing? What existed before the universe? If there was nothing, how can something arise from nothing? If something has always existed, how can it exist without ever having been created or destroyed? These are questions we ask ourselves since childhood, but it seems that no one was mature enough to answer until we become adults and discover that no one really has the answer. Of course, some people believe that everything happens for a reason, while others believe that deep down nothing makes sense. But how strange is it to think about the course that things have taken in the evolution of life and the universe? Approximately 13.78 billion years ago, this strange place emerged where absolutely everything happens. All that existed were some interactions between elementary particles and fundamental forces of nature. It was all so simple, just like that for millions and millions of years. An almost uninhabited universe, a cosmic desert. And after billions and billions of years of expansion, new elements, new stars, massive explosions, and even galaxies emerged. And in the midst of it all, our beloved planet Earth appeared, with its 4.54 billion years of age. This planet that has been home to thousands of species before us. And in these billions of years of existence, it was only approximately 160,000 years ago that modern humans emerged. We are extremely new. On a universal scale, we are practically insignificant. We live in a world filled with strange things that we don't understand. What exists outside the universe? Is time infinite? Could life actually be an eternal recurrence where we always experience the same things in a vicious cycle? Was our entire life already predetermined? Is there free will? If not, can I do anything? If yes, what should I do? And if suddenly I were all alone in the world, what meaning would my life have? How can I deal with the coldness and indifference of the universe? What makes me feel part of society and obey its created rules? Why do most people suffer? Why is there so much injustice? How can we live like this? Maybe there is no reason behind it all. Maybe we are just an accidental product of millions and billions of years of an excessively lonely universe. Maybe we are a brief company for the usual emptiness. How can we live in a world full of strange things that we don't understand? But what if we took seriously the idea that nothing really makes sense? Nihilism is the philosophical doctrine that there is no inherent meaning to the world, that there is no intrinsic structure of reality. The pursuit of the meaning of life would be entirely purposeless, as there is no objective meaning to it, no matter how much we search for it. Nihilism can be applied in different ways, whether in ethics, politics, or even in science, but they all are based on some central ideas. The first is that there is no truth, meaning there is no ideal or correct notion of truth, and therefore our moral actions rely solely on ourselves. The second is that existence has no purpose, so we do not need any value or meaning, as there is no foundation for life in the universe. And finally, the third is that everything is meaningless and nothing we do matters. These ideas have existed since at least ancient Greece, but nihilism began to take shape and become more popular in the 19th and 20th centuries. The term was introduced by the German philosopher Friedrich Jacobi and promoted by the Russian writer Ivan Turgenev. Currently, the name most associated with nihilism is undoubtedly that of the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who used nihilism as one of the main weapons against the moralism of society and religion in his time. However, there are aspects of this history that are not quite as they seem. To begin with, nihilism is not a pessimistic attitude. The worst will not happen simply because evil does not exist, but neither does good. These concepts do not have any real meaning. We are the ones who invent what is good and what is bad. While a pessimistic person lives in the shadows of suffering, the nihilist rejects the existence of any idea of good or evil. It does not make sense to speak of pessimism when what you do or think simply does not matter. Nothing matters. However, one must be careful, as nihilism can have a destructive potential in the long run, with harmful effects for the world and for people, as well as generating existential panic. What nihilism does best is to help us question our moral principles. Who created the system of beliefs and values that you adopt? And why should you accept something so arbitrary? Who would you be if you had nothing and no one to judge you now? That is why nihilism can be considered a transitional stage, but necessary, for us to destroy and rebuild our values about the meaning of life. Nietzsche warned about all this when he wrote that, "Nihilism is the logic of our great values and ideals, thought to the end." Because we first had to experience nihilism to discover, to see behind, what was properly the value of these values. All right, but how to do that? How to destroy everything we believe without going crazy in the process? And that's where existentialism comes in, sharing the same starting points as nihilism, but with different conclusions about how to proceed. The existentialist maxim, according to Jean-Paul Sartre, is that existence precedes essence. This basically tells us that there is no definition or meaning assigned to human nature before our existence. This meaning comes only afterward, given by ourselves through our actions. This may seem contradictory, as we usually consider the essence of things as defining their existence. For example, an object is only a chair if people use it to sit, and an object is only a knife if it is used to cut things, and so on. But existentialism reverses this order. It states that it is existence, the way we exist and what we do, that makes us human. First and foremost, we are human and nothing more. For existentialism, there is also no inherent meaning in the world. However, instead of concluding that life has no purpose, the conclusion is that it is up to us to decide what that purpose is. It is up to us to face the challenges of life and give it meaning. It is precisely for this reason that we experience an absolute and unprecedented freedom, in which we, and only we, can decide what is good and what is bad, what is worthwhile or not. And above all, only we can attribute meaning to life. Thinking in this way, it's not as if we have the privilege of being free. We are condemned to be free. None of our actions have any moral guarantees, whether by higher entities, an evil genius, or a conscious supercomputer running a simulated reality. We have nothing and no one to blame. In Sartre's words, we are alone, with no excuses. We are responsible for each of our actions and choices, and that's why this freedom becomes a burden. No one will come to save us if something goes wrong, but if you had an existential crisis hearing this, it's okay, because that's precisely the motto of the theory. Finally, one might wonder if all this lack of meaning implies that life is not worth living, and that's precisely what the French philosopher Albert Camus did. In the myth, Sisyphus was the most intelligent of mortals. In an attempt to benefit himself, he tries to trick the god of death. Therefore, the gods revolt and decide to give him a punishment worse than death itself. He is condemned to spend his entire life rolling a giant boulder up a mountain so that when he gets there, the stone rolls back down and he has to repeat the process every day. The myth is a metaphor for the lack of purpose in our lives, for the absurd undertakings we get involved in, from work to wars, as well as the pointlessness of human existence as a whole. It's as if we were eternally condemned to a constant struggle somewhat devoid of purpose. Camus tries to show the contradiction of the human condition. On the one hand, we have a reality that is devoid of meaning and quite apathetic towards us. On the other, we have an almost uncontrollable urge to search for meaning, even though this is impossible. So what can we do? Camus gives us three options. The first would be an act of faith, simply accepting some doctrine that gives us meaning without questioning. For him, this option would be unfeasible, as it represents the end of philosophy, the end of doubt, the end of questioning. The second would be to simply abandon this world, to give up dealing with the contradictions of life. But that's not a viable option either. As if living doesn't make sense, dying doesn't either. And finally, the third option is simply to recognize and embrace the absurd, accepting that we will probably never have any purpose and won't even know the meaning of life, if there is one. And yet we choose to live in spite of everything, to live even without knowing why or how. And these are the ideas of absurdism, which arises as a revolt against the impossibility of meaning. Our very existence would be an act of rebellion against the impossibility of seeking meaning in an opaque and empty world. It's choosing to live the impossible and laugh in the face of the existential abyss, no matter how much it stares back at you. You have embraced meaninglessness. You are meaninglessness itself. And yet, you have the passion to go on, living in a paradoxical and indifferent world just because you do. Because that's the only possible freedom, the only one that hasn't been offered to you. You want to live the impossible, to continually make the choice to exist, even if nothing makes sense. Because at the end of the day, even though we may never discover what the purpose of everything is, or why we're here, or how the universe actually works, we are having an extremely unlikely and unique experience of the universe. We are conscious, we are alive. And for me, that's extremely deep and meaningful. Thank you very much, and see you next time.